All right, what's up guys? Well, this is a video I have been wanting to make for a little while now. And today we're going to talk about some buying advice or things to look out for if you are in the market for a Mark IV Supra. If you're new to the channel, this is my 95 Supra Turbo that I got about a year and a half ago. All-time dream car, like all-time dream car. And now, having been through that buying process and having worked on it a little bit since then, a couple of things that I think I could point out for anybody else who might be in the market for one. And I don't know, I watch videos like this all the time, so I figure why not make my version of it. First up, let's talk about mechanical stuff. Now, if you're watching this video, I assume I'm not gonna go into all the technical specs. You know that the 2JZ was overbuilt, over-engineered. Those things are tanks, and they don't really have any one like real main specific point of failure. For example, if you are in the market for an E46 M3, you're typically trying to figure out whether or not the big three have been done, like subframe, vanos, and the rod bearing. So these cars don't really have one of those things that you need to see if that big maintenance item has been done, but there are a couple of things around it that you should still be aware of. Big one, I think, is probably the harmonic balancer. So that's a piece that's made of metal and rubber. Over the years, not even necessarily mileage, they can delaminate. Best case scenario is what happened with my car, because I did have that issue. Best case scenario, it makes an awful screeching sound. You don't mistake it for the power steering pump like I did, and you replace it. You can still buy the OEM parts for it. Worst case scenario is that it breaks up during like a high rev and it shoots out from under the car. It just goes and pings all around the engine bay and destroys a bunch of stuff. That's the worst case scenario. So again, these things can happen over time, not necessarily mileage. So that would be something that you might want to check. If you can turn it, if it feels like it's, you know, spinning loose of the rubber, making like a weird noise, that would be something to replace. I replaced mine. It actually was not that difficult of a job. Breaking the pulley bolt wasn't fun.
Got it. Yes. Oh my God.
But otherwise, not really that big of a deal. So that would be one to look for. The other one, in terms of service, you want to know whether or not it had the 100,000 mile timing belt and water pump service. The cool thing about these cars is they're really not that difficult to work on for a lot of stuff. If you're comfortable with DIY, you'll find that they're actually kind of enjoyable. Enjoyable might be an ambitious word, but just not that difficult, not as involved. Like, it's a lot of straightforward stuff. So anyway, 100,000 mile timing belt and water pump service. Want to check to see that that's been done. If you're going to get a turbo model, if you have a chance to test drive it beforehand, or if you bought it online and you have it shipped to you, first time you go and drive it, you know these cars, the turbo models are sequential turbos, and so that second turbo spools up at about 4,000 RPM. So if you don't feel that kick, that little jolt at 4,000, which is kind of awesome.
Oh my God, I'm in love with this thing.
Then you might have an issue with some seals. Maybe you need to rebuild them, you know, worst case scenario. If you're looking for that 4,000 RPM kick and no exaggerated whine or noises, because those are going to be common if the turbos start degrading. And the last thing I would probably put in this category, and there's a lot of mechanical things that you might look for, but again, we're talking about things that are just very common or specific to the Mark IV Supra. And that's going to be if your valve stem seals are going on that initial startup, you get that big puff of blue smoke. Not blue smoke, but white smoke with a little blue tint to it. I have that going on. That's gonna be probably one of my next jobs on this car. Not a huge deal, but it's just a little unsightly, and you generally don't want like a big giant cloud of smoke every time you start your car, but that is another thing that is, it's not really super specific. I mean, that happens with a lot of cars over time with the valve stem seals going, but it's fairly common with these cars, especially as they get up there in mileage. So overall, when we're talking about, you know, mechanical condition and things like that, yes, obviously these are cars that made their way into the hands of people who love to modify them, tune them, abuse them a little bit, maybe a lot. So that is typically what people worry about when they're in the market for a Supra. However, you also, I think, need to be just as worried about the people who got these cars and just let them sit, because a lot of them turned into garage queens, and there are a lot of people who don't know how to care for a car that doesn't get driven very much. So like, this car had 1,000 miles put on it over the course of 5 years, and when I got it, half of the seals and gaskets and some of the hoses were dry rotted. So again, if it's a car that someone like absolutely loves but never dries and never starts and runs and things like that, then you probably just need to make the assumption that you're gonna have to just run the gamut on, you know, all the maintenance and repair items when it comes to, you know, fluids, seals, gaskets, hoses. The good news is that most of the parts for these cars, at least most in terms of anything that would be like a service item, a wear item, a lot of repair items, are still available new from Toyota. So I get like 95% of my stuff from either Toyota parts deal or from the parts department from my local Toyota dealership. Obviously, there are a lot of things that have been discontinued for years, and for that, you know, you're scrounging through eBay or super forums for guys selling stuff. But for most stuff, you can get OEM brand new from Toyota, which is awesome. So with the engine stuff out of the way, let's talk about cosmetics, interior, exterior. Again, no real big giant points of failure that you typically have to deal with these cars, like, you know, maybe a common cracking dashboard and stuff. Not really an issue with these cars, but there are two things that I would point out in particular that are very common. One, and this is just like a minor little cosmetic, you know, annoyance, but I see it on almost every Supra that I see in a video, is the curling of the passenger side airbag cover. So those always tend to curl. It's just an age thing with these cars being 30 years old. Some people take them off and curl them back, and sometimes that works. I don't think you can buy the entire unit anymore. I have seen the airbag covers available, and I don't think they're like new OEM. I think that people just have them, that they're selling them. I feel like maybe $200-300 for those if it really bothers you. But again, in general, just something to be aware of. The other thing, and the most infamous, I guess, is be famous or infamous. The most well-known thing is the foam coming through the vents. It's almost a rite of passage if you buy a Mark IV the first time you turn the AC on and you get blasted with a bunch of foam. So these cars in the dashboard, the entire dashboard is blanketed in foam. And of course, over time that dry rots. So when you turn on the heat or the air, all that loose foam dislodges and comes through the vents. I actually didn't know it was the entire dashboard. Right? So like right after I got this car, I had that happening. And so I thought it would be a good idea if I just like close all the vents, jack the air up on high. I got my detailing vacuum, and one by one, I went through the vents and sat there with the vacuum as all the debris and foam made its way through, thinking that like, okay, that should be good. Only to find out, like literally 2 days later, I saw a video of a guy do a complete dashboard teardown to see that it's the whole dash is covered in this stupid foam. So unless you do a complete tear apart, you're never gonna get it all. And usually it always finds a way to make it into your eyes, presumably because the vents are always pointed at your face, but nonetheless, it'll always work its way right into your eyes. Speaking of those airbags though, heads up on that. So the 97-98 Supras had a Takata airbag recall. That's the company who made them. It actually affected a lot of cars, but since we're talking about the Supra, it was generally, I believe, those 2 years. I'll link in the description below. There's a website that you can go and put in the VIN number. If there's still an open recall on it, you can take your car to Toyota and they will replace it for free. And the last for cosmetics, interior, exterior stuff is gonna be one, the weather stripping, which again, that's most cars that happens to. It's not super specific, but good news is that you can still buy all the weather stripping brand new from Toyota. It gets a little pricey if you need to replace all of it, but usually if you just have like one little section where there's, you know, something ripped or damaged, you can replace that. And then the other one is rust. Like any used car that you're buying, you know, wheel arches, frame rails, underneath, all that stuff, you're gonna wanna check, but specifically on the Supra, if you're getting a Targa roof, you wanna check around there, and then at the base of the rear windshield is another common spot for rust. So maintenance. Now, really the only thing to point out here is just how easy these cars are to work on. These cars are older, a lot of it is just more mechanical, more analog, a lot of things vacuum driven. There are ECUs in this car, so it's never fun to try to chase down an electrical problem, but you know, for rudimentary stuff like, you know, belts, hoses, fluids, gaskets, seals, all that kind of stuff, you know, a lot of that you can do, you know, in your garage fairly easily. Some of it might take a little bit longer than others, but nonetheless, the one job on this car that was not fun is I replaced the valve cover gaskets on these, and trying to get the valve covers off, kind of a hassle. Those rear bolts in the back are just a nightmare with all the hoses to get to if you're trying not to take apart everything. But again, most stuff very DIY friendly, or if you get everything done at a shop, obviously, you know, have a place that you trust. So, you know, it's not even a matter of like worrying about the mechanic, like taking your car out for a joyride, even though that has happened to people, but more so about, you know, having potentially an inexperienced mechanic work on your baby, because these cars are gonna be older than some of the people working on them. So yeah, I just said they're DIY friendly, so presumably somebody working at a garage would be able to work on them, but that's not always the case. So definitely have a place that you trust, or learn to do this stuff yourself, or do the basics, you know, so on and so forth. Okay, now this next section, I'm only gonna make one quick point on this because quite honestly, I think it would deserve its own video, and I'm not gonna be the guy to make that video because I've never imported a car from Japan. That being said, if you're gonna go the import route, which not a terrible idea, honestly, because there's still almost a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years of cars in Japan waiting to be able to be exported to the States because of the 25-year rule and the fact that they were made until 2002 over there. I don't know the exact month because the import rule goes by month and year, not just year. But there are still at least a year or more of Supras waiting to be able to be imported here beyond the ones that are already available. So that being said, a lot of options out there. If you are going to import a car from Japan, absolutely work with an import house or importer or an auction house, not an import house, an auction house that you trust that has a good reputation. Japan being an island susceptible to salty ocean air, a lot of those cars can have rust issues, not all of them, but if ones that weren't really cared for too well can have rust issues, and it is not unheard of for an unscrupulous garage or dealer to cover up some rust with some underspray or something like that, only to get it over here and find that you have a hole in the floor. So definitely work with a trusted importer or an auctioneer who can go out and inspect the car ahead of time and let you know its real condition before it's something that you bid on. Also not a bad idea to learn how to read a Japanese auction inspection sheet. Is it auction inspection sheet or just an inspection sheet? Whatever. Learn how to read those sheets because they have a lot of great information on there that you can decipher, all kinds of codes and things like that once you get to know them, and you can decide whether or not it's even worth your time based on the condition of a car before you try bidding on it or you know, try to buy it. The only other weird thing I learned about the Japanese market for these cars is that you cannot get a turbo, manual, and a Targa. For me, that was like the dream spec. I had to have all three of those things. Of course, you can get an NA and convert it to turbo, single turbo or whatever. You can manual swap and all that stuff, but like I really wanted to try to find like an authentic, you know, version that had all of those things, only to find out that you cannot get those in Japan. You can have 2 of those 3, but you can't have all 3. All right, now for some miscellaneous buying advice / things to look for / things that I would just note if you are on the hunt for a Mark IV Supra. First up, there are 12 VIN locations. So if you want to verify all of the panels and everything is original for this car to see that it wasn't, something was replaced due to an accident or whatever, 12 VIN locations if you have the opportunity to check them. Of course, everybody always recommends that you get a pre-purchase inspection. I didn't, honestly. I did plenty of due diligence on the place that I bought it from. It was a dealership. Plenty of due diligence on the car, but I guess I would add to that. Don't assume that because you're getting it from a dealership, you're gonna get 100% of the story, because that is definitely not true. And don't assume that because said dealership sells $700,000 Lambos that you're gonna get 100% of the story with this car, because there were a couple of surprises that I found out about when I got it home. Nothing terrible, nothing that made me regret the purchase of this car, put it that way. But definitely there were some things that I'm like, you guys knew about this. Next, service records. Now I could be wrong about this one. Comment below, let me know what you think. Am I off here? I don't believe that these cars commonly have full receipt binders for everything that was done. Awesome if it does, but to me, it's not a Ford GT. And quite honestly, the people that bought these things, I mean, in order to get a Supra in the 90s, especially one that was, you know, turbo with all the fixins, you had to be kind of well off. They were really expensive cars in the 90s. And I don't know, they didn't make their way into the hands of, you know, tuners and that crowd, you know, until a little bit later. So I don't know that the people who got these necessarily appreciated them for the special car that they would become. So I don't know that it's necessarily common to get the full binder of receipts and service records. That's great, everybody wants it. Cool if you get it, but that wouldn't be a barrier to entry for me when it comes to a Mark IV Supra. Your mileage may vary. Related to that, I would also note about not getting too hung up on the things that the car didn't come with. Again, not a Ferrari. If it didn't come with the original luggage, I personally say, who cares? I thought it was cool that this car, like mine, came with the original owner's manual and the toolkit, the little ratchet for the Targa roof, but like I'm missing the tonneau cover. I was missing the plastic caps for where the Targa plugs into on the roof. I was missing the little laminated stow instructions card that goes in the back. All of that stuff you can still buy brand new. So unless you're really hung up on, like, you know, that low mileage unicorn example, and God bless you if you can afford it, unless you're really hung up on that, I would say all that stuff, you can still buy it. You can still buy the ratchet. You can still buy all that stuff. So if it didn't come with it, I wouldn't worry too much about it. All right, now the last point that I would make, probably the most subjective, some of those other ones were a little subjective, but this is probably the most, and that is, I wouldn't treat these cars as an investment, right? Like there are people who buy them and you know, do a little work to fix them up a little bit and can flip them and make some money, and that's all fine. However, if you are in the market for one, I wouldn't get it and just hold it and wait for it to accrue value. I don't think you're gonna outpace the S&P 500 by buying and holding a Mark IV. You know, I'm not in the car speculation business, but like with the market of these things, like there's a floor. I don't think that the value or the price is ever gonna drop off, but I also don't think it's necessarily gonna skyrocket, but it will always trend up. Probably. And if there's any doubt on where the market is for Mark IV Supras, I don't know if you happen to catch, there was a Mecum auction a couple of weeks ago in Florida. There was a 98 6,000 mile all stock Supra sold for $220,000. $220,000. Go back and listen to the commentary for that if you can, because it was actually kind of funny listening to the guys talking. Like they couldn't believe that the car sold for that much money. But that's where low mileage, untouched, perfect examples of these cars are at. Obviously, if they had been modified, higher mileage ones, much more attainable than 220 grand. But again, all that said, I still wouldn't really treat these as an investment. Not to get all philosophical here, but they are meant to be driven and experienced. I'm gonna do a whole ownership/driving video on these coming up. Subscribe if you think you might be interested in that. But yeah, these cars, they deserve to be driven. They deserve to be on the road. So at the end of the day, I would, if you're in the market for one of these, I would get whatever one that you can afford and then either build it or restore it. So anyway, that is it. That is some of my thoughts on, you know, buying advice and things to be aware of if you get one of these cars. So comment below, let me know, is there anything major that I missed? Got anything to chime in? Always interested to hear your feedback, but hope you guys enjoyed the video and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.